British. I live in Dubai. How do I follow the strategies there? I had to find out. And then I ended up writing the first edition of Millionaire Expat, which was in 2013. Right, I'm going to allocate my funds as responsibly as I can. I'm going to invest money effectively. And those people end up doing really, really well and building far more wealth than they would if they were in their home countries. Treat your household like a business. Like if a business didn't track the money that comes in, the income, and the money that goes out, and if it didn't know exactly where that money went, that business would soon be in trouble, likely to go bankrupt. But the really interesting part is that we don't treat our households like businesses. Very few of us actually track the money that comes in and the money that goes out.
Hi, and welcome to the Etihad Bureau podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have as my guest international best-selling author and personal financial journalist and speaker, Andrew Hallam. Andrew, welcome to the show with us.
Well, thank you, Hamad, for the invitation.
My pleasure. We're really excited to have some time with you. I know you keep a busy schedule internationally, but you do pass through Dubai and the UAE from time to time. So it's brilliant to be able to spend some time with you today and hear some of your insights that we'll be asking you for our audience. I think rather than me introduce you, Andrew, although I'm sure many of the listeners may well know you from your work, your talks, and indeed the advice that a lot of us are following, if I may say. Actually, I'd love to invite you to tell us the mission that you've been on these years, because I think it's quite fascinating to start us off.
Well, it really started off small without, I guess, the word mission. Was just that I was a teacher. And so I was teaching high school English at an international school. And when I started my teaching career, I started two careers concurrently. One was as a high school English teacher, and then the second was as a financial journalist. And I happened to have met somebody really influential when I was 19, when I was paying my way through college. He was a mechanic who was a self-made millionaire, which I found it really hard to imagine that because I knew what his income was.
Okay.
And it just didn't make any sense to me. And so he said to me, look, if you're financially literate, you can earn a median income type salary. You can do what you want to do, not necessarily pursue a job just because it pays more. But if you're smart with money, you can end up building wealth on a middle class income or something that you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. So, I went and became a school teacher and started investing from the age of 19. And I think just the idea of being, I think people, educators generally are sort of in a service type industry where they want to share what they know, they want to try to help people. So it was just this natural transition that when I was working at an international school and the teachers weren't getting pensions, like defined government pensions is what I mean.
Right.
And they were often investing poorly or not investing at all. What ended up happening was people knowing my background started asking me questions about their financial future, their own investment strategies. And then I wanted to try to, obviously, to help them. And so that's really how it started out, was me giving these seminars at the workplace.
Okay.
Where I was showing people, hey, you really should be putting aside a portion of your salary consistently every month, investing it effectively. And then I bought a bunch of books, not my books, because at that point I hadn't written any books, but I bought a bunch of personal finance books, and I thought my colleagues would be able to understand them. And it turns out that they really couldn't, even though I thought that they were simple. And I think in part it's that we don't learn this stuff in school. So there are certain words that authors would use that would be considered jargon they sort of flew over the heads of many of my colleagues who were really smart people. And I was a bit frustrated because I had been buying books for my colleagues. So even a book like John Bogle's little book on common sense investing, which is quite a simple book, it would have statements in there like, if you want to beat the market, blah, 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 blah. Well, what does that mean? If you want to earn market returns, you do. What does that mean? And so I remember even creating like glossaries for these, for even that book. I created little glossaries, and I was spending thousands of dollars of my own money, and I was giving them these books out to colleagues, not just that book, but a whole series of other books. And then my editor at Money Sense magazine, because I was writing a a regular column there. I told her about my frustration. I said, oh, I'm giving these seminars, which is great. When I give out books, people don't really understand them. There's always an element that they're like confused about. And so he said, well, you have one option. You can use those people and write your own book. So use their feedback, have people read books or read something you're writing or you're putting together, have people read them that have never read a finance book before, and then question them. Say, okay, be really honest with me. What doesn't make sense? And so that's how I ended up building my first book, which was Millionaire Teacher. And then when people would ask me like, hey, I'm British, I live in Dubai, how do I follow the strategies there? I had to find out. And then I ended up writing the first edition of Millionaire Expat, which was in 2013. At the time, that first edition was called The Global Expatriate's Guide to Investing.
Right.
So then the name changed because that was hard to remember. So it became like Millionaire Expat.
Yeah.
So it's that book is now effectively in its third edition.
Yeah.
But then there's this segue to the talks, and so that kind of thing is something I'd started from the beginning anyway, because people had asked me to speak in my classroom, so other teachers would come and listen, and then other schools would hear about it and they would ask me to speak. And then when I'd written a book, then word gets out even further, so then corporations are asking me to come and speak. And so it ended up being kind of cool, because I was able to, if this is a mission, it's just continuing to do what I love to do, which is sharing information and trying to help people. And the process, I'm finding that just really rewarding, because I've been to so many places as a result of this and met so many new friends. And it's just really rewarding knowing that in a really small way, I've been able to help these people,
Right.
perhaps in a big way.
Yeah. So it's interesting, because I think initially, if someone was to know you, and again, it's easy to classify or categorize someone, right? And given the topic that you talk about around investment and saving and wealth and money and the subject, let's say. But actually, by the sounds of what you've described, it was actually more just about simplifying a topic, and that pure educator's original mentality to say, there's a subject here that you're getting familiar with, but actually there's an audience in front of you who's struggling to grasp a topic. And actually it could have been any topic. It happened to be financial services and financial topics that stood out, and was able to sort of build on that. So that's a really interesting, let's say, connection for what I wanted to talk to you about, for the same reason, because I think at Etihad Bureau, we're also, related to the financial ecosystem. We provide credit scores, we aggregate data, and we do, a lot of connectivity with financial institutions. But actually, and the whole purpose of our podcast and speaking to folks like yourself is that we want to try and make the topic more accessible. It's plain and simple, right? Like whether that's the terminology, whether that's the way things work, and whether it's trying to resonate what it means to people. And that's what really appealed to me about your journey, is it was really more about how accessible you've made yourself. I think your books, your talks, as you say, you have a whole sort of roadshow almost of rolling, access to you. And you were certainly gracious enough to join me on this talk in the same way. And I know you're active in community conversations as well, right? Really actually getting involved in the conversation rather than at an umbrella level. Is it the educator's mindset that you think has just held on to that? Or is it actually been some of the outcomes that you've seen from when you've helped people grasp this particularly challenging topic?
Yeah, it's probably both, because it's it's encouraging when I see the progress that individuals have made as a result of, it's so lovely to I get nice emails and nice text messages from people who said, I heard you speak 10 years ago, and this is where I'm at today. And it just, in a way, that incentivizes this little mission of mine to keep it going.
Fantastic. I think, given what you said as well about the different places you've seen and spoken at, and all of the different communities you would have crossed over with this topic, with the UAE and Dubai and Abu Dhabi and all of the other Emirates, we're such an expatriate heavy population, and people often come here for financial reasons or economic reasons or professional reasons. But Andrew, is there any insights from your time you've spent here, as well as the different expatriate communities you've worked with, that you'd share with us as your observations of expatriate mindsets, expatriate behaviors, versus whether or not there's even any differences in a geographic sense or not?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think a lot of people come here because it's a land of opportunity. We typically, as we know, there's no income tax here. There's no capital gains taxes. There are a lot of opportunities to work for growing businesses or to start your own business. And so the idea of augmenting wealth as an environment, the UAE is primed for people to be able to do that. But what happens is one of two things, and I don't see a lot of the middle road with this. I see one of two things generally. People will come and they will be fairly mission oriented, and they'll say, okay, I understand. And often they're here for a time. They're here for a time period, and they decide, all right, well, I'm going to allocate my funds as responsibly as I can. I'm going to invest money effectively. And those people end up doing really, really well and building far more wealth than they would if they were in their home countries. And then I see another sector, another group of people that comes with that as their goal. But then what ends up happening is and it happens really slowly, but they establish a lifestyle that is relatively unsustainable. And so they might come with the idea of bettering their financial future. But because there is such a high propensity to spend here and to live like everybody else, that a certain lifestyle becomes normalized. And so you go to a workplace, you get hired, you work at a given company. It's your first time here in Dubai, and you start asking your colleagues, so what do you guys do on the weekends? And you start hanging out with them. Where do you go travel? What do you do? Where do you live? What do you drive? I mean, whether you ask it or not, you start to model what's actually around you. That's normalized, but it's not typically healthy. And so we end up with people that get into a situation where they end up struggling because rather than building assets, they end up building debts. They end up falling for a form of lifestyle inflation that isn't sustainable for them.
Is that exacerbated here in the UAE from what you've seen versus other expatriate communities or even non-expatriate communities? Is there a trend or a pattern that you've seen?
Yeah, I do see it. I do see it in fast-growing, exciting places like Dubai. And I just think it's because of the lifestyle is somewhat addictive. The income is high, and so people can rationalize it. They say, well, I'm not paying taxes. My income is high. In some places, employers are paying for rent or paying part of the rent. And so they think, well, I've got this more freedom. There's more leg room here. There's more elbow room or whatever you want to call it to start to branch out, to enjoy myself more. But then we also have interest rates, which tend to be high here. So when you're borrowing money to buy a car, or when you have a credit card and you're having to pay interest on that, the interest rates here in the UAE are significantly higher than they are in most of the rest of the world. So this is where people can end up getting into some serious trouble. They get into that trap, and it becomes hard to climb out of.
So I think given what you said, it often feels that people see credit and access to borrowed funds, if I can call it that, as a way to access things that they might not otherwise be able to afford. Like if they want to access certain assets or products, services, lifestyles, holiday travel, it could be any manner of things. And honestly, even day-to-day things, like kids' education or a place to live. But going beyond what your affordability is, credit is often seen as the access route to that next spending tier or that next financial barrier. How would you help us understand whether that's a fair assessment of what credit does or what credit products are there for versus whether or not that has become, the de facto mindset and actually it's just our view and usage of credit is one of the ways that we might need to reframe it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that credit is incredibly convenient. So take a credit card, for example. It's free money for a month. So literally, if you're buying things on your credit card and you're paying it off every month, you're not getting charged interest for those 30 days or 31 days. So this is free money. And it is so convenient. With your credit card company, you can collect points, you can collect air mile points, you can purchase points, hotel points, whatever those might be. Incredibly convenient. And so using and understanding how to use that as a tool is essential, but not letting it weaponize itself against you. And I think that's the important part. Don't turn it against you, which unfortunately many people end up doing. It starts really slowly where they'll make the minimum payment on a credit card because they don't have enough money to pay for something. And that's the whole point too. I think that generally speaking, if we're going to be using credit, it would be, and I think a great rule of thumb is if you're going to borrow money to buy something, and I'm talking about borrowing money, I'm not talking about like that credit card where you get 31 free days of, yeah, it's interest free, great, it's free money. A good rule of thumb is to never borrow money to buy a depreciating asset. So for example, a car. How many people in the UAE borrow money to buy cars? A car is a depreciating asset. The interest rate on that is incredibly high. And the value of the car drops over time. So I would say, if you can't buy the car outright, you can't afford the car. It's not about whether you can afford the payments. That doesn't mean you can afford the car. Can you afford the car? And especially here when interest rates on vehicles are really, really high. Now, when we're talking about homes, a home is an appreciating asset over time. It doesn't mean that your home is going to increase every single year, but we know that over time, over 15, 20, 25-year periods, yeah, the value of properties rises. Can you buy a property with cash? Not many of us can. But we can borrow money to buy that as an appreciating asset. Plus, what makes it a lot friendlier is mortgage interest rates tend to be a lot lower than interest rates on, for example, purchasing a car, or than indeed on material acquisitions via a credit card.
It's not credit per se, but as you say, it's the way we apply credit to the types of purchases, assets, depreciating versus appreciating, is one way that we can look at reframing our relationship with credit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so how might the behaviors that you often see associated to people who are struggling with credit, be what you might help to advise improving upon when it comes to people managing their financial well-being? And then equally empowering themselves with the opposite, which is more around saving and investment and, how else to manage the money they have, either in addition to or before credit becomes a part of, their financial behaviors. I think I'd love to hear from you about that.
Yeah, I think like putting a mantra up on your wall that says something like this, a credit card company will never make money from me. I mean, if you can live and go through life with that as a mantra, that's fantastic. A credit card company will never make money from me. I mean, ideally, and what I used to tell my students when I taught personal finance is I'd say to them, look, I want credit card companies to actually hate you. Who do they love? They love people that pay the minimum. They love those people because they can make loads of interest on those people. What they don't love is they don't love people who pay off their credit cards at the end of every month and collect all the points. They don't love those people because those people actually cost the credit card company money. You want to be one of the people the credit card company doesn't like. You want to be one of the people that cost the credit card company money. If you can go through life just with that in itself, that's going to be fabulous, because what it'll do is it will free up money for you to invest in your future if you're not paying interest rates on stuff that you borrow.
Interesting. Okay, so Andrew, what would be some good financial behaviors that you might be able to advocate for us on what really makes a difference to people?
Treat your household like a business. Like if a business didn't track the money that comes in, the income, and the money that goes out, and if it didn't know exactly where that money went, that business would soon be in trouble, likely to go bankrupt. But the really interesting part is that we don't treat our households like businesses. Very few of us actually track the money that comes in and the money that goes out. And so if there's one thing that I think is the most valuable piece of advice that I could give your viewers and listeners, it's to track every penny that you earn and track every penny that you spend. So you can track it. You can go old school. You can use this. You can use an app on your phone. There are a whole variety of different expense apps. You can use Pocket Expense or Mint or Good Budget. It doesn't matter. So tracking what we spend ensures that two things. one is that we become accountable for what we're spending because we can see things categorized. And some people will say, well, no, my credit card actually categorizes my spending for me, but it's not the same. There's something tactile about when, you and I earlier went down to that coffee shop, and afterwards, if we just took out our phone and we categorized coffee and we put like how many dirhams that was and pressed enter, it just takes a few seconds. But at the end of several months, you and I could then look at our phones and see it categorized and say, well, look how much I spent on coffee, or look how much I spent on eating out, or whatever the category is. And it allows us to then align our values with our spending. It allows us to question whether we really get that much out of that particular expenditure. And so if we don't, it creates that level of accountability where we think twice, because knowing we have to track everything, we think twice before spending on some of these things that may or may not give us value. And so, that's a really important part. I know that I often refer back to a Weight Watcher study too, that wanted to see like what single variable allowed people to lose weight most effectively. And it wasn't diet and it wasn't exercise. It was simply tracking what people ate, treating their household, in this case, like a business. And then when you're doing that, taking an investment goal, making an investment goal at the very beginning of the year. So you set a goal and make a SMART goal. So obviously you want it to be specific, measurable, you want it to be achievable, you want it to be time-oriented, you want to be able to share it. And so talk to some people who are in a similar situation as you in terms of your income. Maybe you have 2 children and they have 2 children. And say, okay, what are we saving this year? You're going to be like my partner here. It's like you and I running a marathon. If we decide we're going to run a marathon, you and I will decide that together. We set a goal, and you and I literally make each other accountable for that. We train together. And so if you have a colleague who's in the same kind of income situation as you have 2 kids, they have 2 kids, you can say, okay, let's set this as our goal and let's make each other accountable for it. And then remove that money as if it were a tax at the very beginning of the month or as soon as you get paid.
Right.
Get that money out so you're not going to be tempted to spend it, and then track everything else along the way. If you can just do that, you are well on your way to a far rosier financial future.
I've often heard that behavior framed as pay yourself first, right? And I think when I heard it that way, it really helped resonate that point. And people don't pay themselves first. They pay everything else first because we have obligations, and they are obligations. They need to be paid. But if you've earned the money, you should get paid first as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a simple way to help understand it.
And you do pay yourself first too. So let's say somebody's watching this right now, you're listening to it, and you have a car loan, and you're paying interest on that. Okay, realistically over time, your car loan is likely going to be charging you a higher rate of interest than what you're going to get on your investments over time.
Right.
And so here's an idea. Pay yourself first. In this case, it's all right. I am hammering down that car loan, or I am hammering down that credit card. That's paying yourself first. I'm taking it to zero. I'm going absolutely like commando-like. I'm just going to destroy it. I'm going to go in and attack it and take it down to nothing. And then at that point, you build a reserve of 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses that's in ready available cash, just in case. So the idea of your roof is leaking and you need to fix it. You're not going to get too many leaking roofs here in Dubai, but your air conditioner is broken. So you need to fix it. There's an outlay of cash required there. Or a family member needs some money and you need to be able to help them. You don't want to have to dig into your investments for it. You don't want to have to borrow money for that. So you have that ready available cash, or you get laid off. And so, or you want to transition from one job to another because things aren't going well at work. And so that idea that you have that aside, you pay off high interest debts, you build that reserve of 3 to 6 months of living expenses, and you pay yourself first eventually. Once you get those 2 things out of the way, you pay yourself first by, I would suggest, if you want to beat the vast majority of professional investors without any effort at all, a low cost portfolio of exchange traded index funds, which is globally diversified, and just adding money every month.
It's a strategy that's often now advocated for, right? And I think For those who perhaps haven't followed that strategy, it's well researched. There's a lot of information about that. For sure, your books go into a bit more detail as to what some of that means, to your point about, demystifying it and how you go about investing in that manner. But between whether it's the investing, whether it's managing your credit, whether it's your interest, your obligations, those behaviors you've described, is there any insights you've got, especially coming across so many different communities and geographic audiences, why we struggle to do that? I mean, is there any insight that you've got about what makes it so difficult? But also, I can only assume you've seen people who have done it and it's made the difference. Because it's always easy to give a guideline or an advice, or, oh, here's an idea, why don't you do this, and it will get the outcome. But I know in your travels and in the work that you've done, like you said, you've come back to people after 10 years and you've seen things they've done. Help us understand both the challenge that we're maybe all facing to actually adopt some of these simple and fundamental financial behaviors, and the difference that it really does make.
What people advocate is defer gratification. And I actually don't like that. I don't like the term, because the term is wrong. Okay. So when people say defer gratification so you can invest at some point in the future so you can be happy later on, that in itself doesn't make any sense. In that, okay, are we going to be miserable today for some point when we can be happier in the future? No. But the point when it comes down to behavioral research on life satisfaction, it actually suggests that when we do something on a regular basis, let's say we're going out for dinner a lot, that's expensive. There's an opportunity cost there. That's money that could be invested. And when we are going out for dinner on a really regular basis, it's no longer a treat. It no longer enhances our life satisfaction. We might think it does, but it doesn't. Behavioral research suggests that we simply get used to whatever it is that's happening. It's no longer special. Whether that's you going to the spa, whether that's you eating, going out for coffee every day, it's much the same kind of thing. There's a hedonic adaptability that comes into play. It's much the same when it comes to upgrading your vehicles. So research suggests that people that drive high-end vehicles think that they enjoy driving them more than they would driving low-end vehicles or mid-range vehicles. So this is what Daniel Kahneman called reflective happiness. It's almost a justification, or it's what we think. But we're really not very good at determining what will actually make us happy in the future. So when Michigan State University did a study on automobiles, and they wanted to determine how satisfied are people who drive high-end cars versus mid-range cars. When you ask them, hey, you've got a Ferrari, hey, you've got a top-end BMW, are you happier driving that than you would have been driving a Honda Civic? They'll all say yes. Oh, for sure, I'm much happier. That's what we call reflective happiness. But in the study, where they were asked on a day-to-day basis, each day, rate on a scale from 1 to 10, how much you enjoyed your latest driving experience. And there were a whole series of other questions these people were asked. They really didn't know, what were the researchers looking for.
Sure.
What they found was that people that drove high-end vehicles didn't enjoy their driving experiences any more than people that drove mid-range vehicles. So the car in itself did not increase a component of life satisfaction. So here's where we get back to deferred gratification and how that's a myth. I'm going to defer gratification by not going out for dinner 4 times a week. That doesn't defer gratification, because we simply get used to whatever it is that we have. Same with a high-end vehicle. I'm not deferring gratification by not buying a top-end Mercedes-Benz and investing money for my future. And I think that's the challenge, Hamad, is people actually think, I have to sacrifice to build wealth for my future. You don't have to sacrifice. You don't have to sacrifice anything. When we look at the research on life satisfaction, the behavioral research on that, this becomes really quite evident.
The insights that you've got are endless, to say the least, right? And I think it's been a pleasure talking to you about how we demystify and how you have helped to demystify this kind of complex topic for people, right? And I think we'd love it if you can give us your final thoughts on, what are the real insights that you think make the biggest difference to people when it comes to their relationship with their personal financial well-being, especially because a lot of people are only really coming to even understand that phrase. If we go back to our point about jargon even, and I'll apologize for even using the term if people who are listening are not familiar with it. But, at the Bureau, we're really trying to help encourage people to understand that your overall well-being, your financial well-being is for sure a component of that. And so getting closer to understanding how we can include our financial well-being in our overall life satisfaction, to your point, how might you help advise us and our audience, and through your insights, as to what does that really mean and how do we actually go about doing it?
Well, if we're looking at, so overall success, if we ask people, why do you want to be successful, or what is success to you? And someone says they live a particular way, and we ask them why. Why are you making these financial decisions? Ultimately, it'll come down to them. Ultimately, if we keep digging, they will say, well, it makes me feel good. It's about life satisfaction. So if our motivations are about purpose and life satisfaction, then we need to reverse engineer that. We need to look at research to suggest, okay, what is it that enables us to live the best lives that we can? And we know that it comes down to relationships. We know that we need a certain amount of money. We also know that with respect to borrowing money and credit, we also know that research suggests that debts lead to misery and lower levels of life satisfaction. So the idea that we would be borrowing money to buy something that depreciates affects our financial bottom line. We generally don't end up getting more, as I mentioned with that Michigan State University study, which was replicated in Germany. When it comes to a vehicle, it doesn't enhance our driving experience. And if in turn we go into debt to do these things, it's this circular spiral that we don't recognize is really happening. So I think just the idea of looking at overall life satisfaction and looking at the research on that and looking at how our finances are a part of that is a really important component. If you're building assets and not debts, obviously you build choice. It allows you choice to take time off, for example, choice to explore and use your money for experiences over material acquisitions. Experiences allow us to enhance our life satisfaction far more so than material acquisitions. Like you and I were talking about earlier, on your deathbed, what are your regrets? It's not going to be that you didn't buy that Maserati back in 2042. It's going to be that you didn't take time to smell the roses, spend time with family, maybe get friends together, spend your money to get friends together to go on a Himalayan hiking experience. Because these are the things that build memory, that build identity, and these are the things that we'll talk about around a campfire years from now, not the stuff that we actually bought.
So if I can sum up that final point, it's almost like financial well-being must include an element of using your finances in order to actually invest in your well-being.
100%.
So it's a more holistic idea of what makes us happy and what, can drive value in our lives, not necessarily always, material things, some of which we may need, like a roof over our head or a vehicle, etc. But also those experiences, right? And how that all comes together to say you're financially managing yourself to keep yourself well. Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm for sure we could talk for many hours and days, but I want to thank you for your time and to your insights. I'm sure our audience is going to enjoy listening back to this as well. So thanks again for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.